The endless war. The war had lasted for centuries. The Zephyr Dominion and the Vorak Alliance had been fighting for so long that no one even remembered how it started. Entire planets had been reduced to ash. Billions had died, yet neither side was willing to surrender. Both factions had built massive fleets, filled with the deadliest warships the galaxy had ever seen. They had weapons that could destroy moons, shields that could withstand supernova-level blasts. But no matter how many battles they fought, no one could claim victory. Now, the war was reaching its final stage. The Zephyr Dominion, tired of endless bloodshed, had decided on one last desperate move. A fleet of 10,000 warships gathered at the edge of Vorak space. Their mission was simple: wipe out the Vorak homeworld. They would strike with full force, leaving nothing behind. The Vorak would either be destroyed or forced to surrender. High Commander Tyrell stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at the massive fleet assembled before him. He knew what this attack meant. If they succeeded, the war would finally be over. If they failed, the Zephyr Dominion itself might collapse. But he had no doubt. They had superior numbers. They had the best weapons. The Vorak could not stop them. "Begin the advance," he ordered. Thousands of warships moved forward in perfect formation, entering Vorak-controlled space. But something was wrong. Long-range scanners detected strange energy signatures ahead. It wasn't Vorak technology. It wasn't Zephyr. It was something else. Tyrell frowned. "Send a scouting team." A dozen fast attack ships moved ahead. Moments later, their signals vanished. No distress calls. No debris. Nothing. Then the darkness of space shifted. Out of nowhere, a fleet emerged. Unknown ships. They were unlike anything the Zephyr had ever seen. Sleek, black, and massive. Their hulls absorbed all light, making them appear like shadows against the stars. No markings, no insignias, just death in the form of warships. And then they attacked. The Zephyr fleet barely had time to react. The first wave of unknown warships opened fire with weapons that tore through their shields like paper. Ships exploded instantly, their hulls sliced apart by weapons that defied all known technology. Tyrell's eyes widened in shock. This was impossible. Even the Vorak did not have weapons like these. "Retreat," he shouted. "All ships, retreat now." But it was too late. The unknown fleet moved with terrifying precision. Every Zephyr warship that tried to flee was hunted down. Their largest dreadnoughts were crushed in seconds. The Zephyr fleet, the strongest force ever assembled, was being erased. And then, the Vorak fleet arrived. They had also prepared for a final battle. But now, as they saw the burning wreckage of the Zephyr ships, they realized the truth. They were not the target. The unknown fleet was not picking sides. They were ending the war. A transmission came through all frequencies, broadcasted across the entire galaxy. A voice, cold, commanding, human. "You have fought long enough. You will answer for your crimes." Then silence, and the war that had lasted for centuries was over in a single night. The Vorak and Zephyr fleets drifted in stunned silence. The war that had raged for centuries, one that had destroyed entire civilizations, had come to a sudden, unnatural halt. Not because of surrender, not because of negotiations, but because of them. The unknown fleet had appeared from the void, unstoppable, merciless, and unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Zephyr Dominion's strongest warships had been wiped out in minutes. Even the Vorak, who had been preparing for a final stand, did not dare to fire a single shot. The mysterious warships now floated in the empty void between the surviving forces, silent, motionless, waiting. A single transmission repeated across all communication channels. "You have fought long enough. You will answer for your crimes." The voice was human. But that was impossible. Humanity had been wiped out centuries ago, a forgotten race that had vanished in the early days of the war. Some believed they had been exterminated. Others thought they had simply been too weak to survive in the brutal galactic conflict. And yet here they were, a fleet of warships so advanced, so powerful, that they had ended a war in a single night. On the Zephyr capital world, Emperor Xal Tun sat frozen as reports flooded in. His advisors scrambled, shouting theories, desperate for answers. "How is this possible?" One of them stammered. "Humanity was destroyed. We saw their last colonies burn." "But if they survived?" Another whispered. "Where have they been all this time?" Xal Tun clenched his claws. He did not know the answer. But he did know one thing. If humanity had returned after all these years, it was not for peace. On the Vorak homeworld, Supreme Warlord Corvan stood in his war chamber, staring at the holographic display of the unknown fleet. He had fought in the war for over 100 years. He had witnessed the rise and fall of empires. But this was something beyond war. "We underestimated them," he muttered. "We thought they were weak. We thought they were dead." He turned to his generals. "Find out everything about them. Every legend, every old report. If humanity has returned, then we must know why." Across the galaxy, panic spread. Civilizations that had once mocked humanity now whispered in fear. They remembered the stories, the warnings about what happened when humanity was pushed too far. And then the Ghost Fleet moved again. But this time, they were not attacking. They were hunting. For what? No one knew. But one thing was clear. The war between the Vorak and Zephyr was over. And a new war, one that had been centuries in the making, was about to begin. The Vorak and Zephyr forces had barely begun to comprehend the return of humanity when the first disappearances began. Entire scouting fleets, sent to investigate the Ghost Fleet, vanished without a trace. No distress signals, no wreckage, just silence. Fear spread like wildfire. The Vorak and Zephyr, enemies for centuries, now found themselves united in terror against an enemy neither of them understood. In the depths of space, a Zephyr war council convened. Emperor Xal Tun sat at the head of a massive circular chamber, surrounded by his highest-ranking officers and advisors. "We need to act before it's too late," growled Admiral Vokthar, his reptilian eyes burning with anger. "We must strike first." "Strike first," another officer snapped. "They wiped out our strongest fleet in minutes. If we provoke them, we could be next." Xal Tun remained silent, his sharp claws tapping against the armrest of his throne. He had built the Zephyr Dominion through war and conquest. He understood power. And right now, humanity had all of it. "We do not attack," he said finally. His voice was cold, calculated. "Not yet." The room fell silent. "They are watching us," Xal Tun continued. "They are studying us. We must learn their true purpose before we decide our next move." He turned to a shadowy figure standing near the edge of the chamber. "Deploy the Shadow Core. I want everything on these humans, where they came from, what they want, and why they have returned." Meanwhile, on the Vorak homeworld, Supreme Warlord Corvan was preparing for war. Unlike the Zephyr, the Vorak did not hesitate. They were a warrior species. They had survived the galactic war through brute force and relentless aggression, and they would not bow to humanity. "Humanity is strong," Corvan admitted to his war council. "But they are not gods. Every fleet has weaknesses. Every enemy has limits." He turned to his second in command. "Prepare a strike force. Small, fast, precise. We will capture one of their ships." A few of his generals hesitated. "We are fighting an unknown enemy," one said cautiously. "What if?" Corvan cut him off with a sharp glare. "If we show weakness, we die." His warriors nodded. Within hours, a Vorak elite strike team launched from a hidden base in deep space. Their mission was simple: board a human warship and retrieve intelligence. But they never returned. Instead, a message arrived. A transmission. It showed the Vorak warriors, bound, broken, defeated. And then the same cold voice from before spoke. "Do not test us." Then the screen flickered out. The Vorak forces did not attack again. Because now they knew the truth. The Ghost Fleet was not just returning. It was hunting. And the Vorak and Zifar were running out of time to figure out why. The Vorak and Zifar had spent centuries fighting each other, but now, for the first time, they had a common enemy. The Ghost Fleet had proven its strength. It had destroyed the Zifar's most powerful fleet, crushed Vorak warriors with ease, and made one thing very clear: it was not here for diplomacy. But what did it want? That question haunted every ruler, every general, and every surviving soldier across the galaxy. And then, before either faction could act, humanity spoke again. A broadcast was sent through every known communication channel, reaching every major star system. The message was short, but it shook the galaxy to its core. Your war ends now. You have burned worlds. You have slaughtered billions. We watched from the darkness. We waited. We prepared. And now you will answer for what you have done. There was no demand for surrender, no offers of peace, no negotiations, just a simple, terrifying truth. Humanity was passing judgment. The Vorak and Zifar were no longer rulers of the galaxy. They were prey. The Zifar's desperation. In the Zifar capital, Emperor Xal-Tun felt something he had not experienced in centuries: fear. The Zifar Dominion had conquered hundreds of worlds. They had crushed civilizations, enslaved weaker species, and ruled with absolute power. But now, they were powerless. "Send emissaries," Xal-Tun ordered. "Offer them tribute, planets, anything. We must find a way to end this before it is too late." His advisors hesitated. "What if they refuse?" one asked. Xal-Tun clenched his jaw. "Then we prepare for extinction." The Vorak's gamble. Unlike the Zifar, the Vorak did not beg. Supreme Warlord Korvan stood before his war council, his claws digging into the steel table. "Humanity is powerful," he admitted, "but they are still flesh and blood." His warriors nodded. Vorak's strategy was simple. If an enemy cannot be reasoned with, they must be destroyed. "We will strike their fleet," Korvan declared. "A single, decisive attack on their flagship." A Vorak general frowned. "They have technology beyond anything we have seen. How do we defeat them?" Korvan's expression hardened. "We don't need to defeat their entire fleet. We only need to kill their leader." It was a dangerous gamble. But for the Vorak, there was no other choice. And so, they prepared for war. The Ghost Fleet moves. As the Vorak and Zifar scrambled to react, the Ghost Fleet struck again. This time, they did not just attack warships. They descended upon the homeworlds. Massive black warships loomed over Zifar and Vorak planets, their weapons humming with deadly energy. And then they fired. But not at cities, not at military bases. Instead, they targeted government buildings, military headquarters, shipyards, the centers of power. Within hours, the Vorak's largest military base was gone. The Zifar's main fleet factory was reduced to dust. The message was clear. Humanity was not here to conquer. It was here to punish. And the Vorak and Zifar were running out of time to stop them. The Vorak and Zifar had no more options. Their fleets were shattered. Their strongest bases were gone. Every desperate attempt to strike back had failed. The Ghost Fleet was everywhere, moving like shadows through the stars, appearing without warning, and leaving only ruins behind. And then, humanity spoke again. A single, massive warship emerged from the darkness of space. Larger than any known battleship, its black hull reflected no light, making it look like a hole in reality itself. It transmitted a simple message across every Vorak and Zifar world. "Meet us. Face your judgment." A location was provided, deep in neutral space. The Vorak and Zifar rulers had no choice. If they refused, humanity would simply erase them from history. Emperor Xaltun and Supreme Warlord Corvan arrived at the designated coordinates, each aboard their personal warships, surrounded by what little remained of their once mighty fleets. For the first time in history, the leaders of the two greatest warring factions stood side by side, not as enemies, but as condemned criminals before their executioner. The Ghost Fleet's flagship loomed before them. Its massive hangar bay opened, inviting them inside. Neither of them wanted to go, but they knew they had no choice. Accompanied by their elite guards, they entered the unknown ship. The interior was dark, silent, and unsettling. The walls were smooth, cold, and unlike any metal they had seen before. There were no markings, no signs of crew, just emptiness. Then they reached the command chamber. A single figure stood before them, a human. He was tall, clad in a sleek black uniform with no insignia. His face was calm, but his eyes burned with something ancient, something unforgiving. "I am Commander Elias Voss," he said. His voice was steady, without emotion. "And you stand before the last remnants of humanity." The Vorak and Zifar leaders exchanged uneasy glances. Xaltun stepped forward first. "If humanity still exists, then why have you hidden for so long?" Voss's expression did not change. "You wiped us out," he said. "Or so you thought." The room grew cold. Voss continued, stepping toward them. "Centuries ago, when the Vorak and Zifar war engulfed the stars, humanity was nothing more than a minor species, a footnote in your endless slaughter. You destroyed our colonies. You hunted us. You erased us from history." He paused, his gaze turning sharp. "But we survived." Corvan clenched his fists. "Impossible. If you had power like this, you would have fought back then." Voss let out a dry, humorless chuckle. "We had no power back then," he admitted. "But war is the greatest teacher, and you gave us centuries to learn." He gestured toward the massive ship around them. "We watched from the shadows. We studied every mistake, every weakness, every failure of both the Vorak and Zifar. We did not build an empire." His voice grew colder. "We built an executioner." Silence. Then Voss spoke the final words that sealed the fate of the galaxy. "Your war is over, and your judgment has begun." Silence hung in the command chamber like a storm waiting to break. Emperor Xaltun and Supreme Warlord Corvan felt something they had never felt before: true helplessness. For centuries, they had ruled through conquest and destruction, believing themselves invincible. But now, before them stood humanity's ghost, a civilization that had risen from annihilation, forged in secrecy, and returned as something far more terrifying than either Vorak or Zifar had ever imagined. Xaltun narrowed his reptilian eyes. His voice was calm, but tension coiled beneath it. "If you wanted revenge, you would have already taken it," he said. "What do you really want?" Voss stared at him, his expression unreadable. "What we want," he said slowly, "is justice." The Vorak warlord let out a low growl. "Justice? You think you can pass judgment on us?" Voss didn't blink. "Who else would?" Xaltun's jaw tightened. "You are a single fleet. No matter how powerful you have become, you are still outnumbered. If you seek war, you will." "War?" Voss interrupted, his voice sharp. "You think this is war?" He took a slow step forward, his shadow stretching across the cold floor. "This is not war," he said. "This is a reckoning." Suddenly, the chamber's walls came to life. Holographic images surrounded them. Countless Vorak and Zifar worlds, their planetary defenses displayed in real time. Then, one by one, those defenses shut down. Weapon grids deactivated. Planetary shields flickered out. Communication relays went silent. Xaltun's blood ran cold. Corvan clenched his fists, baring his fangs. "What have you done?" Voss's voice was steady. "We have disabled your ability to make war." The Zifar Emperor shook his head in disbelief. "Impossible. Our systems are encrypted. We spent centuries watching you, Voss said. We built our technology in secret, designed to counter every weapon you rely on. Your war machines are relics. Your empires are paper castles. He turned, slowly looking at both rulers. You are no longer in control. Corvan's breathing was heavy, his claws flexing at his sides. So this is how it ends. You wipe us out. You become the monsters you swore to fight. For the first time, Voss's expression changed. A flicker of something old, something painful. No, he said, we do not seek to rule. We do not seek to conquer. He raised a hand, and a final image appeared. The Vorak homeworld, the Cipher capital. A countdown had begun. Corvan's eyes widened. Zaltun's voice was barely a whisper. What is this? Voss answered with the cold certainty of a man who had already made peace with his decision. Your war ends today. The Vorak and Cipher leaders stood frozen, watching the countdown tick toward zero. And for the first time in history, the galaxy truly knew fear. The countdown reached zero. Across the galaxy, the Vorak and Cipher homeworlds braced for annihilation. Their leaders watched in stunned silence, waiting for the fire, the destruction, the end. But it never came. Instead, everything shut down. Planetary power grids collapsed. Military networks failed. Communication hubs went dark. Every warship, every defense platform, every weapon system that had once fueled their endless conflict was disabled in an instant. The Vorak and Cipher, the two greatest powers in the galaxy, were now blind, deaf, and helpless. The judgment of humanity. Supreme Warlord Corvan slammed his fist against the command table. What have you done? Commander Elias Voss stood motionless, watching as the realization sank in. You wanted war, Voss said. But war requires weapons, armies, fleets. And now, you have none. Zaltun's claws dug into his palms. You think we need weapons to rule? Our people will rebuild. No, they won't. Voss gestured toward the holographic screens still flickering around them. Across every Vorak and Cipher world, humanity's true strike was revealed. Their central command structures had collapsed. The Vorak's warlords, the Cipher's ruling council, all had been taken down simultaneously. Some were captured. Others vanished. The Vorak and Cipher had not just lost their ability to fight. They had lost control of their own people. The fall of tyrants. For centuries, the Vorak and Cipher had ruled through fear. They crushed rebellions. They silenced voices. They enslaved weaker species. But now their people saw the truth. Without fleets to keep them in check, without armies to enforce their rule, the Vorak and Cipher homeworlds erupted into chaos. Oppressed species rose up. Entire planetary sectors declared independence. And for the first time in their history, the Vorak and Cipher were powerless to stop it. A new era. Corvan's breath was ragged, his hands trembling with rage. You think this is mercy? He snarled. You have doomed the galaxy to anarchy. Voss met his gaze, calm as ever. You doomed yourselves. He turned toward Zaltun. Centuries of war, billions dead. You burned planets to fuel your empires, never once considering the cost. And now, the cost has come due. Zaltun lowered his gaze. He knew it was true. The Vorak and Cipher had ruled with an iron grip. Now, that grip was broken. The Ghost Fleet had not conquered them. It had simply removed their power to rule. And the galaxy would decide their fate. The final message. Voss took a final step toward them. His expression was unreadable. This is our warning, he said. Humanity will never rule, but we will never allow rulers like you to rise again. He raised his hand, activating a final transmission. Across every surviving world, the last message of humanity echoed through the stars. The war is over. The age of tyrants is finished. If you rise again, so will we. Then, without another word, Voss turned and walked away. The ghost fleet vanished, fading back into the depths of space. The Vorek and Zephyr, once the masters of the galaxy, were left standing in the ruins of their own empires. And across the stars, a new future began.